Your Maragil Cian Carla. First, let me welcome the Minister as my first opportunity to congratulate her on her role, and I don't in any way underestimate the enormity of it, and I want to wish you well, because it is one that is vitally important, and your success is in all of our interests in that regard. The committees that we've got the COVID committees that we've got the most satisfaction out of undoubtedly have been ones that pertain to education, and particularly when we invite representatives in from interest groups that work with young people who have undergone serious upturning in terms of their experience in education since April. The starkest one of those for me was yesterday when we had representatives in from Inclusion Ireland who were talking about the experience of children with intellectual disabilities as they firstly had been affected throughout the COVID period, and they talked about the regression of students with intellectual disabilities and how it's absolutely essential for those students to be aided to, I don't want to say catch up, but certainly support them in their endeavours. There was a huge contrast yesterday. We had members in from the Parents' Council, Secondary and Primary Parents' Council, and we had members in from Inclusion Ireland. And all three of those organisations had done a survey of their members, and the parents groups from primary and secondary school all suggest that there was a degree of satisfaction with the reopening of schools, and it was going as well as it possibly could be, although with the caveat that they've only recently opened. And then it was the parents who were surveyed with students of intellectual disabilities, and they reported being highly unsatisfied with the experience of their children throughout the education system. And I'm not sure if it's certainly not fair for me to say that that's anybody's fault, but it is absolutely all of our responsibilities. And Minister, I know you've met with Inclusion Ireland last week. I'd ask you to take on board all of the suggestions they've made, particularly in relation to the fact that I think it was 11% of the members surveyed were very clear in the fact that remote learning wasn't something that was suitable for their particular child, and we need to make accommodations, because that's not acceptable that we allow any child to be left behind during this pandemic period. I'm going to touch briefly on SNAs, and I know various speakers before me have done that also. I'm going to make a very specific issue in relation to SNAs, and that's the guidelines in relation to medical masks. The guidelines as it exists at the minute in relation to PPE, medical masks for school staff, and in particular SNAs who work in such close proximity, is far too vague. There is a line in the document on masks which states that medical principals should consider providing medical masks. There is absolutely no need for the word should consider. There's a vagueness that's creating an ambiguity that's meaning that some SNAs are being left without the appropriate medical equipment. I think we can shore up those guidelines to leave no doubt that all SNAs should be able to avail of the appropriate standard medical masks in terms of their interactions with students. It's absolutely essential. It's a basic respect. You do an incredible job. There's other considerations for SNAs in terms of how we support the professionalisation of the sector, and we'll come back to them on another day. The final issue I want to talk about, and it's a rarity for me to come into the Dáil Chamber and talk once more about a personal constituency issue for one family, but I raised the issue yesterday with the Minister. I raised it again today with department officials of a family who, the mother of the family, suffers from chronic lymphomatic leukemia. It's a very rare blood cancer, and she is in the extremely high risk category. And they have two teenage children who both go to different schools, one a secondary boys' school, another a secondary girls' school. And they've been totally unable to send their kids to school for the fear of what would happen should the virus enter the school and they bring it back home. The department has told that family that it is the responsibility of the school management board. The school management board have rightly, in my estimation, highlighted the fact that they don't have the medical expertise, and nor have they been given any appropriate guidelines from the Department of Education of how they can cater for the very specific concerns, worries and indeed terror of that family. I raised it again today with officials, and officials highlighted the fact that they are operating from HSC and NEFIC guidelines, which say that all children, even with underlying health conditions or even who may have a family member at home, should go back to school because of and it's an understandable concern because of the necessity of socialisation, because of improved mental health support. And I would accept that for many, many students across the board, but not this particular family, and they're certainly not a family of their own. The department has to be malleable. It particularly has to be malleable in a situation where families are at extreme risk. I cannot ask any teenager to go to school with the worry that they may bring back a virus at home which would have fatal consequences for a family member. I think it's absolutely incumbent upon the Department of Education to not be washing their hands of this family, not say that they're simply taking, we should all be taking advice from the HSE, but we should also understand that there are particular conditions where the evidence just isn't there for. Schools closed their doors in March. We don't have enough medical evidence to suggest, as was told me today, that there's a very low risk of transmission from children to adults when we're actually dealing with teenagers who will soon to be young adults. The evidence isn't there for that family to play Russian roulette. I think we need to address it.
Guramagat, you have to